Hello friends, I'm Rob, this is Digital Wastrel, and in this video I'm going to be talking about House Goliath GeneSmithing, which is a special thing that House Goliath has access to in Necromunda, using the House of Chains book. So I'm going to be talking about what it is, how it works, and I'll be giving a couple of examples of gang members that you can build using the system. So let's go! So what is GeneSmithing? House Goliath, actually most of their members are grown in labs. House Goliath has huge gene vats where they have big tubes and they basically grow Goliaths in them. They come out all already muscly, and they have like some kind of implant in the back of their head which gives them all of the language and knowledge that kind of normal humans would have growing up. So they come out ready to work, basically, because House Goliath was designed as a kind of working slave race, and they still mostly grow new Goliaths that way. There are basically three types of Goliath gang members. You have Vatborn, which are your normal kind of baseline Goliaths, and they, as the name suggests, come out of Vat. Yeah, they're the normal type. They live not very long, maybe 7 or 10 years. They have very short, violent lives, and they are the typical Goliaths that you would think of. Next up, you have Natborn, who are naturally born Goliaths, when, you know, two Goliaths, male Goliath and female Goliath, get romantic behind closed doors, and baby Goliath comes out the normal way. And yeah, Natborn basically have a longer lifespan and generally healthier, a little bit smarter, a little bit greater capacity for learning, I suppose. Natborn are kind of a new development for the Goliaths, and the house in general sees Natborn as a way to kind of free themselves from the technology and the drugs that the house is dependent on. So they put a lot of faith in natural-born Goliaths, and they see them as the future of the house. Finally, you have unborn Goliaths, who are outsiders, who are come to the house later in life and undergo surgery and drug enhancements to become big and beefy and join House Goliath. A variety of reasons why you might want to join House Goliath, but usually they are pit slaves who've won their freedom and kind of earned the right to upgrade themselves to full Goliath members. So how does GeneSmithing work on the tabletop? Basically, when you recruit a new Goliath gang member, you have the choice of applying one of the GeneSmithing upgrades. Vatborn is your standard baseline and costs 0 credits, but Natborn and Unborn both cost a slight increase in credits to apply to your ganger. And then after you've selected one of the 3 subtypes, you then have a 3 different selections of GeneSmithing upgrades, which you can then put onto the ganger. All of this has to take place before you recruit the ganger, so you can't do this mid-campaign. Goliaths are quite an expensive gang anyway, and you can only put GeneSmithing upgrades on when you first recruit a member, so you can basically make some pretty expensive gang members. So spend your credits wisely and have a good think about what you want the ganger to do before you recruit them. Vatborn ganger upgrades are fairly tame. You get a few options. Quite a nice one is you can get a bonus to toughness. There are also some bonuses to willpower and the mental stats. Mostly this is quite a cheap one, and it's a nice little way to personalize some of your gangers without spending too much. Natborn has a lot more hefty upgrades that you can get. You're already spending quite a lot with just the basic Natborn upgrade, and with this type of ganger you can really go crazy and get some really nice buffs onto your baseline Goliath stats. So yeah, this is kind of the fun tree. And Unborn, this is kind of the weird one. There's all kinds of extra stuff you can put in here. Worth having a think about also is the negative upgrades that you can get, which decrease the costs. Yeah, you can use this one to make some kind of weird, not quite right Goliaths if maybe you have a gang member from a different house, or, you know, ex-bounty hunter or something like that. You can make some fun combinations with this tree. Let's have a look at some examples that I've come up with. These are not really designed to be like high-end or highly competitive. I'm awful at games, so don't expect any winning combinations to come out of this part of the video. However, the amount of options you have when you're looking through GeneSmithing is a little bit overwhelming. So these are just some ideas to get you started and some possible builds that you can have some fun with and maybe inspire your own gangers. So let's have a look at some GeneSmithing examples. First off, we're going to have a look at the super expensive leader build that I made. The thought process behind this guy was basically, how can I spend as many credits to make something ridiculous over the top as a starting point for my leader. So we started out with a Forged Tyrant, which is your House Goliath leader, obviously. And then I added on Natborn and bought the two upgrades, Iron Flesh and the Tyrant's Own. So Iron Flesh gives him +1 wound characteristic, and the Tyrant's Own gives him +1 to 2 other characteristics that I can choose. So I gave him movement and toughness as those bonuses. So all in all, we've got movement of 5, which is pretty quick for Goliath, and hopefully you can use that to take some people by surprise and get those charges off. Then toughness 5 and 3 wounds is pretty brutal. Should be able to shrug off quite a large amount of firepower and wade through your enemies and build up a nice fearsome reputation, I feel. For loadout, I've given him armored undersuit and furnace plates, which mean he's going to get a 4-up armor save from the front, and obviously you want your Goliaths facing front, wading into the battle. So combined with his toughness and wounds, that should make him pretty tough to kill. And then for his weaponry, I've given him a power hammer and a plasma stub combi pistol. This is probably not the most efficient loadout, but it's a really cool looking loadout, and it's what I have modeled on my leader, so that's what I went for. If you want something a little bit more nasty, obviously you could go for maybe like a bolt gun or something long range, or chain axe is a very, very good. Power axe is also nice. Just have fun with whatever you want to give him. Whatever he has, he should be able to brutalize quite a lot in close combat. And then finally for skills, he's got Nerves of Steel, which means that he should be able to avoid pins. Natborn means his cool is 5+, which isn't quite as good as so the baseline Goliath, but still 5-up cool check is pretty easy, so he should be fairly unstoppable, as Goliath leaders should be. Next up are my Goliath Trash Goblins. I made my first Trash Goblin miniature a few years ago to represent a Juve in my first Goliath gang. After House of Chains came out, I finally had a way to get appropriate stats that fit with the diminutive size of the miniature. I started out with the Unborn type, which enables me to choose a non-standard skill set. As a Juve, he won't have access to it just yet, but if the little guy earns enough XP to get promoted to champion, he'll have some nice options. The skill set I chose is Cunning, with the aim of eventually getting Infiltrate. I like the idea of these guys crawling out of air ducts behind enemy gangers. At that point, you could give him all sorts of nasty weaponry, and he'll be pretty scary on the battlefield, but that's assuming he lives that long. I took the upgrade Proto Goliath, which increases his movement by 1, decreases his strength and toughness by 1 each, and then messes with cool, int, and willpower 2, but we don't really care about those stats. The end result is movement 6, strength 2, and toughness 3, which I think perfectly suits these weird little mutants. They will die as soon as someone looks at them, but at 40 credits with a stub gun, who cares? If you want to get a little bit fancy, take a look at the new improved Deluxe Trash Goblin. Exactly the same as the previous one, only this time I spent creds on some incendiary charges. Will he hit anything with his 5+ ballistic skill and 6-inch throw range due to his puny strength? Very unlikely. However, the threat of a movement 6 goblin armed with a 5-inch blast with the blaze trait is not to be overlooked. And if he can't hit the enemy, hopefully he can at least set himself on fire, which should, in my opinion, be the primary goal of trash goblins everywhere. Goliaths are known for their muscle, ferocity, and their close combat prowess, so why not do something a little bit different and create a long-range dealer of death? And that's what we've got here with the surprisingly accurate Goliath. I started off with a Forge boss, which is the champion type, and I gave him Natborn, and then you used the Prime Specimen upgrade to give him ballistic skill of 3 up. I armed him with a Heavy Bolter, which is +1 to hit at 18-inch range, and of course you can use the aim action to boost that further, which means even shooting at enemies in cover, you should have a pretty good chance to hit. The Heavy Bolter is pretty nasty, so you'll have a pretty good chance of cutting down anything that you do hit. And he can lay down some nice accurate fire and take out some long-range problems, so the rest of your Goliaths can get up close and personal. This guy comes in at 295 credits, including the Heavy Bolter and some basic furnace plates, which is quite a lot. I would recommend getting some suspensors as soon as you have the credits, which enable you to move and shoot with heavy weapons, because if you don't have a good line of fire to deploy this guy in, he's going to be kind of a waste. But still, if you have the credits, he's kind of fun and a bit of a change from the normal brute Goliath guys. Next up is another case of miniature that I made first and then had a look at the GeneSmithing options to try and represent him on the tabletop. So this is another Forge boss, which is the Goliath champion type, and he's basically a knife fighter. So I decided to try and keep him kind of cheap and cheerful. So he's basic Vatborn, which keeps his cost down, and I gave him the Dermal Hardening upgrade, which gives him toughness 5, so he should be able to survive some hits. And he's just armed with 2 fighting knives, and then I gave him the Berserker skill. So he's got 2 attacks base, and then he will have 3 because of the 2 close combat weapons, and then on the charge with the Berserker skill, he'll be rolling 5 attacks. So at 135 credits, including furnace plates, he's kind of cheap and cheerful, but he should be able to put out enough dice to chop someone up. And hey, who doesn't like knife fighting? So there you go. That's my little introduction to GeneSmithing, and kind of concludes all the videos that I've been doing recently on the House of Chains book. If I've missed something important, let me know in the comments below. I will probably be taking a look at some of the other house gangs in the future. Thanks for watching. I hope this was useful, and yeah, press subscribe, press like, all that stuff. See you next time. Goodbye.